The first time the nanny realized something was terribly wrong, it was not because the little girl failed to respond to sound, but because she flinched at silence. In a mansion filled with wealth, echoes, and unspoken rules, the millionaire's daughter sat by the window every morning, staring at the garden with eyes that carried fear far older than her small body. Everyone believed she was deaf. Doctors had signed papers, tutors had adapted lessons, and her father had built an entire life around that assumption. But the truth, buried under money and pride, was far more cruel. Before this story unfolds any further, pause for a moment. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the power of one person to change another's life, take a second to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this live because people like you believe they matter. The girl's name was Alara, and she was 9 years old. She lived in a house so large that her footsteps disappeared into carpets imported from countries she would never visit. Her father, Adrian Vale, was a man known on magazine covers and business channels as a self-made genius. He was respected, feared, and admired, but inside his own home, he was distant, precise, and emotionally absent. When Alara was 5, after a traumatic incident no one liked to discuss, doctors declared that the child had lost her hearing. Adrian accepted the diagnosis without hesitation. It was efficient. It explained her silence. It allowed him to move on. From that moment, Alara became a fragile project rather than a child. Specialists came and went. Tutors spoke slowly, exaggerated their mouths, and wrote words on boards. Her father funded the best care, the most advanced therapies, and the quietest rooms. But he never noticed the way she startled when doors closed too loudly, or how her eyes followed whispered conversations she was not supposed to understand. He never noticed because he never looked closely enough. The nanny, whose name was Mara, arrived years later. She was not impressed by marble floors or crystal chandeliers. She had raised her own siblings after their mother died, and had worked in homes where love mattered more than luxury. To her, Alara was not a deaf child. She was a lonely one. Mara noticed things immediately. The girl responded to footsteps when she thought no one was watching. She reacted to music vibrations with strange familiarity. She seemed to understand instructions long before they were written down. At first, Mara assumed it was coincidence, or that children developed clever coping mechanisms. But the patterns became impossible to ignore. Alara was obedient to a fault. She never cried loudly. She never asked for attention. She moved like someone trying not to exist. When Adrian was home, the air shifted. His presence did not come with warmth, but with control. He rarely touched his daughter, rarely smiled at her, and spoke about her in front of her as if she were a problem to be managed. Mara learned bits of the past through overheard conversations and half-finished sentences. Alara's mother had died suddenly in what was publicly described as an accident. After that, the child had changed. She stopped speaking. She withdrew. Adrian, drowning in grief and responsibility, had trusted the experts who told him the loss had damaged her hearing. Accepting that explanation was easier than confronting what else might have been broken. One rainy afternoon, while Adrian was away on business, the truth cracked open. Alara had been sitting on the floor drawing quietly when a glass slipped from Mara's hand and shattered behind her. The sound was sharp and violent. Alara screamed, a raw, terrified sound that filled the room. She covered her ears, curled into herself, and sobbed uncontrollably. In that moment, there was no doubt. Deaf children do not react like that. Mara knelt beside her, heart racing, and realized she was witnessing not a disability, but trauma. Over the following weeks, Mara paid closer attention. She tested gently, carefully, without frightening the child. Soft sounds, whispered movements, distant noises. Alara heard them all. But sound, to her, was not neutral. It was dangerous. Loud voices, sudden movements, even raised tones made her body tense as if bracing for harm. The truth became horrifyingly clear. Alara had not lost her hearing. She had learned to pretend she could not hear because hearing had once hurt her deeply. Silence was her shield. Deafness was her escape. Mara understood that something terrible must have happened after Alara's mother died. Something no one wanted to see. Something Adrian had ignored, not out of cruelty, but out of emotional blindness. The mansion itself held clues. Locked rooms, sudden silences when staff approached, a particular wing of the house Alara refused to enter. The child's fear was not imaginary, it was rooted in memory. Mara faced a terrible dilemma. To reveal the truth meant shattering the careful narrative Adrian had built. It meant confronting a powerful man with the possibility that his daughter had been suffering right in front of him for years. It meant risking her job, her safety, and the child's fragile trust. But doing nothing would be another kind of cruelty. Mara arranged for a discreet child psychologist, one she trusted, under the guise of routine care. The sessions were slow, gentle, and focused on safety. Over time, Alara began to express what words she could not speak. Her fear was not of sound itself, but of anger, of shouting, of a night when voices rose, objects broke, and a child hid while her world collapsed. The truth was devastating. After her mother's death, Adrian had not been violent toward Alara, but the house had been filled with arguments between him and relatives, lawyers, and business partners. One night, overwhelmed and grieving, Adrian had exploded in rage, smashing furniture, shouting uncontrollably, while Alara watched. In her child's mind, sound became synonymous with danger. Her silence began that night. When doctors examined her afterward, her refusal to respond was misread as deafness. Adrian, broken and exhausted, accepted it without question. It allowed him to believe his daughter was damaged by fate, not by the emotional storm he had unleashed. When Mara finally told Adrian the truth, it was not dramatic, it was quiet. She presented evidence, expert opinions, and her own observations. She spoke calmly, but her words cut deeply. Adrian did not react immediately. He listened, his face unreadable. The idea that he had failed so completely was unbearable. He had given his daughter everything money could buy, yet missed the one thing she needed most: safety. That night, Adrian sat alone in his study, replaying memories he had ignored. The way Alara flinched when he raised his voice, the way she froze when doors slammed, the way she watched him constantly, measuring his mood. For the first time, he saw his daughter not as a condition, but as a frightened child. Change did not happen overnight. Guilt does not transform into love instantly. But something shifted. Adrian began attending therapy sessions. He learned to sit quietly with his daughter, without expectations. He learned to lower his voice, to control his temper, to listen. Alara, sensing a change, slowly began to emerge from her silence. It was not speech at first, but presence. She stayed in rooms longer. She drew brighter pictures. She stopped flinching at every sound. Mara remained her anchor through it all. She protected the child's pace, ensured her safety, and reminded Adrian that healing was not something he could purchase or rush. Months passed. The mansion felt different, softer, less intimidating. One morning, Alara stood by the window as usual, but this time she turned when Mara entered the room. Her lips moved, barely forming a sound, but it was enough. It was the beginning of her voice returning. Adrian heard it from the hallway. The sound stopped him in his tracks. He did not rush in. He did not demand more. He simply stood there, tears streaming down his face, realizing what he had almost lost forever. Before this story ends, take a moment to comment below. Write a single word that represents what this story made you feel. Sometimes one word is enough to connect hearts across the world. Alara never became the girl she might have been if trauma had not touched her life, but she became something just as powerful. She became resilient. She learned that silence could protect, but voice could heal. Adrian learned that success means nothing if it costs your child their sense of safety. And Mara learned that sometimes the most important truths are the ones everyone else is too afraid to hear. If this story touched your heart, if it made you think about the quiet pain children carry and the responsibility adults hold, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and leave a comment. Your engagement tells us these stories matter.